So it'll come through later. It's not charging yet.
It is logic.
I was saying the stream looks a bit far. That's it there. Can you click over to the next slide, Sid? Elise. Yeah. You can't really see.
The boss will put that
Over there.
and then catch people's heads together.
Just
Because yeah, the screen's going to be on an angle, but you're going to get people's heads.
if we record it from here,
Yeah, you just want to sit the same time, yes.
I mean, yeah, we can place in the middle and try that. Just run the
Here we
corner.
go.
Pick up everyone around.
You pick up when you're over there. I'm not sure what it's going to be. It's going to be like that. But I don't think it's the issue isn't necessarily the resolution either. It's the contrast.
Testing.
Hello.
There you go. This does not feel stable at all.
Yeah.
You'll have to change the charger to the back of the room. But that's all right for positioning, yeah? Yep.
So where are they meant to be presented from, Michelle?
Is there a port? Yeah.
Is this good, Michelle?
It hasn't come through yet.
Okay.
All the horses, cheers.
Using on.
She's.
I didn't realize you were doing PhD.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Is that not most people? Is it presenting or?
Yeah, no. I just think. Did you do honours or something and then work in
that's directly in.
So you've been doing PhD for
Yeah. I finished my
There you go.
honours at RMIT. So
Right.
we go straight like was it like undergraduate honours?
Yeah.
So went straight into PhD.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, been
So you
around
must
for
have been
a
doing.
while.
Right, okay, there you go. Right. I was just out of the loop. I barely keep up with my own stuff, let alone what happens
Yeah, no,
downstairs.
fair enough. How are you tracking?
Yeah, I think I'm in you said you're about 9 months.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm probably about there as well.
yeah,
So you know the feel.
yeah. It's starting to go a bit real.
Yep.
Testing.
I've been putting that off for as long as possible.
Yep,
It'll be nice to get it done.
for sure. What's next for you? Do you next step, or is that still sort of being sussed out?
I probably want to head overseas to do a postdoc.
Mhm.
But that means I need to start reaching out. And
Yeah, right.
whatnot. So again, we moved up a little bit, but yeah, in the next few months, I'm gonna start
Yeah, cool.
reaching out and
Do you have contacts that you can start with, or who your supervisors can maybe put you in touch with?
supervisors could
Yeah.
put me in contact with some people in Italy,
Mm.
which I'm hoping to get there for a few months at the end of the year
Yeah.
to do a placement.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, yeah, I've got a couple of mentors at the moment, which are sort of helping me to work out how to sort of just brace.
Yeah.
Because cold calling is, doesn't get you all that far.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a see what happens and see how far I get, and then work backwards if
Yeah, for sure.
nothing's working. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, that's
Well, I guess at least the overseas option is back on the cards now.
it's been
This time last year would have been.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like for my placement, it was supposed to be sort of 2 years ago, and then now it's been pushed back to sort of August. So
Alright.
I feel like that's the
Yeah,
first trial.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Just the waters.
Maybe
but
just hang around.
yeah,
Just don't leave.
it's looking like it could be that way. Yeah.
Change the lighting so it's the contrast isn't too bad.
It's the lighting coming up there.
Yeah, I know. That goes in.
No, it's the projector lighting, not the other lighting.
My Instagram looks good there. In the same darkness.
Is this better, mate?
Watch out, it opens very quickly. Yes, it is.
Yeah, you film them.
Yeah, I think like honestly at this stage, it's like I was aiming to get done by halfway through the year. That's a bit ambitious, but if I can get it, it's kind of like halfway through the year, I'll sort of have a better gauge on whether it'll be done by the end.
Yep.
But either way, I'm graduating with the at the end of the year, and then if it's going past that, it'll get done when it gets done.
Yeah.
Whereas at this stage, I think by the end of the year, it's
Yeah.
still possible.
Will you go straight into either full or part-time?
Yeah, so I'll just go straight into internship. So that's why if it's already going past the end of the year, it's like, well,
Yeah,
it's anyone's guess as to how long it's going to take then. Yeah.
So, yeah. So don't, I need a Christmas one too, yeah? Oh, yeah.
Do you already know where you'll be doing?
No, so our applications open up next Monday. So put in 8 preferences and cover letters and everything, and they take into account like they're allowed to see who's your top 3, 5, and 7 preferences.
Yep.
So a hospital will be like, we'll only take people who preference us in the top 3 or something like that.
Yep.
So you've got to sort of
Yeah.
whatever
It's just,
do all that. But yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
but surely with the PhD.
Yeah, hopefully that. Yeah, got to do like all the anything to do with research is kind of like as good as it can be for
Yeah.
an MD student. So whatever, it'll work. I'll get somewhere.
Yep.
Alright,
Morning and all.
better just sort out where I'm gonna sit.
Yeah.
Where's my phone?
Yeah. Yeah. Some people just show, yeah. Wait a second. Yeah. This one, I'm just not gonna. Yeah. It was totally like, because it was a bit dodgy when I wore it. Yeah. Just grabbed them from my closet and I was like, oh no. I put boots on there, and I'm just like both the side boots on both shoes are like lifting up, and I'm still wearing them because I need to buy new boots. Yeah. But like every time I was like, is this when it's time where it fully like exactly. But then I think it's like glue them every time. Yeah. So get that little bit of security. Yeah. I think we are.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, I sent mine in and then like I was like watching them that like
Yeah.
They're all like, yeah, it'll be interesting. And I like obviously you keep it super high level, but I was like with this because it's all like stuff, is it just gonna be like oh, God, it's this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, even though you're supposed to kind of really have context,
Yeah.
by the end of the day, it might be.
Yeah. I have another person there.
That sort of thing.
Seems to be-
Yeah.
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 That's right.
Cool.
So does that mean there's a gap?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Wait,
What?
okay,
Okay, so 28 minutes. That's great. It's like,
Yeah.
anyway, I was just such a I did one quick run through as I was working with what it said, and it kind of made me all, you know, but I thought probably that's good because I was being a bit stressed. Oh my God.
I went to this last night.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
"Click now."
Yeah. I think I dreamt like the words.
And then I ran
Yeah,
to the-
that's lovely.
like, I want to be like, okay.
Yeah. When once you get comfortable with it, you're so fast. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I found that too. Like you have to keep a certain pace, otherwise you kind of like. Yeah. But I think it's better, much better to be on the short side than hard on. They're gonna
Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah, you can't really change that.
Oh, it's just for the camera.
Fine.
Fine, I don't know. It's, I find it a lot less nerve wracking than because I guess with that you feel like you're more scared of like asking a question that reveals your total role.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't mind if you
Yeah.
were here.
Yeah,
Um,
I was
how are you
thinking that you just in front.
We're doing time of
Hmm.
day, like time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm just
they're gonna be
because of my
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
At least it's okay.
Yes. For better or
Yes.
worse.
For better or worse, yeah.
And with their wipes, I'm looking COVID.
Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah, pretty mild, I think, and then 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Pretty mild, so that's good. But yeah. An excuse to just like chill out for a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that I know.
Alright. I was left with my parents. Nothing else. I didn't get to do any of the tasks on my when I get COVID this time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we should just
Are you maybe feeling ready?
good.
Yeah, good. Thank you for not pulling out of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we saw there was a few less ones.
Yeah.
And then COVID people or just
Yeah.
Yeah.
COVID task force, so
Yeah.
It's tough.
There was a little part of me that was like, oh, if I got it today, it wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, I know.
But
I'm
I'm
like
here,
everyone with that.
unfortunately.
Yeah, so we'll go through a briefing in roughly half an hour if you want.
Yeah.
Quite simple. It's 3 minutes on the dot.
Yeah.
We'll have a time on the clock here for you guys to see. You guys start when the clock goes from 3 to 3:59.
Yep, okay.
Counts down.
Yep.
As opposed to you starting at the end. So it's
Yeah.
consistent. And yeah, there's an alarm. No questions. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
It's not too bad.
exactly.
so yeah, 3 minutes on the dot.
On the dot.
Stop
Yeah,
talking.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll basically,
Okay.
Or
Is there a, do we just project or?
there's a mic.
Oh, there's a mic.
Obviously.
The handheld.
Yeah,
Gotta
not,
hold it.
not there, not
Okay.
there.
Yep.
Not
All right.
there. We'll go through all that stuff.
Awesome.
thank you.
That's it.
Yeah, because I also do the like
Yeah.
twin hand
Yeah.
the mountain tells everything.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with that.
Yeah. I like having something to hold on to initially as well.
Yeah.
Because like, I think I'll be the kind of person that like definitely like, if you get a bit shaky, it's just nice to be like, yeah. That's it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. What did you put on your sign? Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like 4 components with all these arrows.
Yeah.
It's like a lot.
Yeah.
See it.
The room is off the audience.
Yeah.
So it's a rich, like you're gonna say it's put together. And math and stuff.
Yeah.
This, and then I watch them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah. I went really. I was really. And then I
Yep.
just ended up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was like, oh, maybe it's like an abstract sticky in my brain. And then I was like,
Yeah.
so I thought, oh well.
All
Yeah,
right.
it is.
So yeah, yours is very simple.
Yeah, I just mentioned an enzyme. I very like barely sort of say this is what I'm doing. If anything, it's maybe like yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it takes a while. Yeah.
And I think that it's that's the I was like back in like 2020, we did during like like the second lockdown and treatment thesis group. So I could sort of like at least what I used as a script for that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't starting from scratch. That was like very different because we were just on Zoom, so you just like
Yeah, read it.
have a right there.
Yeah.
To memorize. Like a monologue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be good to do yeah, other teachers and love to see how like yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like how they go about. Yeah. Or some inspiration.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
So, like,
We should do that.
yeah.
But we'll be fine. We've already got it.
Okay. Like after the meeting. You see
You just like, oh.
like I didn't feel myself in it.
Yeah.
And then no. Like staring up.
Oh my
And in my
God.
head, this isn't how. In my head, I was like, and then it was like, and then like staring at me.
Yeah.
Which was like, I could see that.
Yeah.
It was so funny. Like,
Yeah.
she's like, I'm so much. Like, you need to apologize.
It is funny how like I feel like the students are always pretty you know, or like getting into it. Like, Yeah.
But that's down.
Parents drop dog sitting aside. So then they'll be there at like
Good morning.
Bacteria. At least they're familiar with it in a microphone. Yeah.
It's gonna be super.
Too close.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. Everyone needs to, yeah. Condense and see how. Because so there's gonna be, they're gonna have an iPad view counting down. So like, and I'll allow for it to be three.
And if it's not your art of the competition, you think.
Yeah, or it's just, you know, it's just you have to stop. Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah. Ah.
so you are like,
Yeah, I think people dropped out and she's she's not gonna be here, so I'll be first up for the second half, which is good, get out of the way, and then step for second half again. Yeah. But,
Speak to the audience as opposed to just the camera.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
you've done before, but
Yeah.
you lost it. Super experience. Easily. And tell me one day.
Is it the same?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, so
Oh wow.
But yeah, so the question is, why do we need this report?
Yeah.
I wrote the sentence, why do we?
Yeah.
Okay, it's hard. Was it done that?
Yeah.
Radar. Radar is
No, that's definitely.
Love not difficult parts of you.
Show it up.
We do, but we
Yeah. Let's see your headshot on the website.
So that
You
you
can't
find
do the
people
usual. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, and it's unmuted.
Huge cruise on your far away.
Yeah.
From uni.
Last time.
Please, you can stand up there and let me know if you see this one or not.
Did they get the money? I say what? Yeah. And I left this one home too.
Yeah. It says.
Specific time of the year. So
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the usual things that it was small. It was it's strong. Yeah.
So at minimum,
December? Is it
Yeah.
Go overseas.
Yeah.
No news, but.
So I'm in the committee. Being biased. Good.
You've got one now. You've got one.
Just present the A and C first.
Yeah.
Like it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's stuff that you can't do here.
It's just gonna kill you again. You fix it up.
Yeah.
Because I think I saw there was like that was saying something about university strike exchange, even though they're allowing it.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. So the same like insurance issues actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just its policy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll add a solid that's presented.
I can use some of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No shades on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, signature or something. Yeah, I got all the documents. Eureka sign.
Yeah.
Made it to Ruby. Made it to
Yeah, no.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
and then I you.
Yeah.
A few months. Yes, yeah.
Was the MSF
Right, yeah.
I know. Yeah, like again, I was, yeah, like I'd like to have like maybe by the time I have the data already. I mean, there's still lots to. But yeah, I think I understand. It's like you want to get the most out of it, and there's like experience to do. But
That's another thing.
talk about so yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, we can postpone eventually.
And that would work for me.
Yeah. So like,
Do you need me to like start?
I think it's good.
Alright, thank you.
It's like, kind of, it's like, it's very that's why it's short bursts for me. It's just like I was writing it.
Yeah.
I'm Brett. I read that today.
Yeah.
I think mine. Yeah, shoot for it to.
You're fine. You're fine.
That would work well. Like, yeah, I'm certainly
Sit back into
throw together a
Sure.
presentation by Monday. So I think
that's perfect.
because I was hoping to just have like a complete set
Just don't want an unflattering angle of your
examples
That's not hard to get.
and then
Even that's fine. So anywhere.
but yeah, yeah. But I
Just crossing the knees.
very much my shoe was obviously.
No, you can't.
It's
all right. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's going okay. Yeah, I like I was saying, I just because you know I published on like literature and integration, but like still the extra like introduction my job or all these decisions that are
Harder to gauge.
embedded in the project that I think in a thesis was still need to.
Yeah, I think.
So I was working on it today, but it's actually it's not very hard to write, especially because having just done working down on paper, like all the sort of references are all like front of mind.
So you went back up.
It's not urgent, so the way, but yeah, I'll still trying to do this, which is interesting. But stretching a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, all that.
I mean, I'm there as well.
Yeah. Always necessary.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, Daniel, he was saying to me, oh, I wrote in my first draft, like drinking red wine just to like stuff. But it's not too hard to write. I think the hardest thing is just getting yourself to sit down and start. And once you start, it's okay. But it's just like, and it's like the fear of the task. that stops you.
No, that's just one quote.
Welcome everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us. I think this is the first in-person event I've attended in about 2.5 odd years. So thanks for everyone for coming down, and welcome to everyone joining us online. I'm Sid, I'll be the MC for today. Just before we begin, a few housekeeping things to run through. First of all, for those joining us in person, you'll notice a program on the seat next to you. There's a QR code there if you'd like to scan that with your phone. There's a little section for feedback for each of the presenters. And at the end of that feedback section, there's an opportunity for you to summarize the presentation. And if you summarize the presentation, you go in the running to win an audience prize at the end. And the same applies for those joining us online today as well. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the webpage, there should be a section for feedback as well. For those who are joining us in person today and our presenters, just a quick run through. They'll have 3 minutes to run through their presentations. We'll be holding it quite strictly to time. And there'll be an alarm that goes off. So if you hear the alarm, don't be alarmed. That's just your cue for the next presenter to come up. There'll be no Q&A session as well today. And if we could all hold the applause to the end of the presentations, that'd be great. And for those in the room as well, you'll notice there's an iPad sitting in the middle of the room that's being that's live streaming the session to all of those joining us online. So if you could please keep it a little bit quiet around the iPad for us, that'd be great. Just to start off with then, I'd like to hand over to Professor Jane Gunn, who's the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences, to open our event and perform an acknowledgement. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be here with you this morning. It's great to see you all here, and hello to those of you on the iPad. I'm Jane Gunn, and I'm Dean of the Faculty. And I'd like to begin by just making a formal acknowledgement of country and really taking the time to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we are meeting today. And they are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. And we're in the site of the old Royal Women's Hospital. And for those of you who haven't been to Melbourne Connect before, is this a new experience for you? Yep, good. You might like to spend some time when you go down into the central area where you see some trees and there's little bench seats and things. And that's a really special place that has actually had quite a lot of input from traditional owners, Wurundjeri people who've come and really spent some time basically sort of doing some healing ceremonies there, because whilst many babies were born joyfully at the Royal Women's Hospital, it is a sad part of history, a tragic part, that there was also the site where many babies were taken away from their mothers and as part of the stolen generation. And so there is a little poem there on the seat that you can find if you're very observant down there. And so I just, spend a moment just realising that we're in a place that has both joy and sadness tied up with it. But it's now the wonderful Melbourne Connect, and it's a magnificent building. I really encourage you to have a look around, and once you see that, there's these open levels with cafes and collaboration zones, which of course you're welcome to use, and we really do encourage students to be a part of this building. Science Gallery, I'll give a plug for that. It is open today, and if you do get any time to sneak in and have a look, it's fantastic. It's got an exhibition called Mental in there. It's all about wellbeing and mental health, and you might get a chance to have a look. If you don't today, please do come back and visit. It's fantastic. So this is a really unique event, and it's conducted by students, for students, showing the breadth of the work that you've been doing as part of your commitment to orthopaedics and musculoskeletal health. And it is fantastic to see so many people signing up to this area of interest, and I know that that will grow over time. Student-run initiatives, you must have timed this perfectly, or I could claim it was timed perfectly, because yesterday I launched the Faculty Student Advisory Council. And so it must be the week of student initiatives. And certainly we'll be going out and letting you know more about that if you haven't heard about that. But we are forming an advisory council that will really provide advice to the faculty about the future, about things that we want to do, and we want to have students at the heart of everything that we do, because you are our future. Plus, you know a lot more than us, let's face it, and you have much more interesting ideas, there's no doubt. And whenever I go to the student events, there's amazing things that come out of the work that you're doing, and we want to really capture and embrace that. And of course, it's great to see OPUS really taking a lead in this area, and I'm not surprised, so well done. Now, we also recognise that we can do much better research, much better clinical practice if we engage really deeply with the people that we're doing all of that for, the patients that are experiencing these conditions, living their lives with all the sorts of conditions that you learn about as part of your healthcare training. And we know that if you can embed lived experience into both the research endeavour and the learning experience, that you do get a much better outcome for everyone. And so I'm really delighted that today you have a big input from consumers as well, and that they're going to be forming part of the judging panel. I just hope they're not judging me, I said there. For feedback. But I would like to give a very special thanks to Ms. Marion Glanville-Hurst, who's a long-time consumer advocate at OPUS, Mr. Bob Eden, consumer advocate at OPUS, and Ms. Margaret Fears, consumer advocate at OPUS, who I think is on our iPad. So hello to you, Margaret, and Professor Ian Incole, who's a strong proponent of student engagement and education. And thanks so much for making this part of your stop during your visit to Melbourne. I'm sure you are going to have a fantastic morning ahead. I'm going to hang around for a little bit, but I hope that the rest of the day goes really, really well. So well done to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here.
For opening us up there, Professor Gunn. Well, without further ado, I suppose we can call out our first presenter. And so please, Catherine Sear, who's presenting from the Melbourne Medical School, will be leading us off. So,
just over here, Catherine. Let me know when you're ready.
So my project is protocol development of surge AED. Let me start by taking you back to Melbourne in 2016, when the warm weather brought pollen up into the atmosphere and thunderstorm broke that down into tiny particles, followed by a cold gust of wind that brought that down to ground level. It was inhaled into the lungs, and in susceptible patients caused an inflammatory reaction and an asthma attack. This caused over 3,500 patients across Victoria to present to emergency departments. The system was overwhelmed, and unfortunately this resulted in 10 deaths. Several strategies have been implemented in trials for disaster management. However, their evaluation is hampered by delayed, incomplete, and inconsistent data collection. This is where a bundle of care comes into play. A bundle of care involves 3 to 5 preset protocols that, when used together, improve patient care. Our proposed bundle would involve patients scanning the QR code using their smartphone device as they enter the emergency department. Here they would enter information on their symptoms as well as demographics, used for retrospective data analysis as well as for disease stratification. Next, they would be given educational resources. For example, in the 2016 disaster, it's notable that only 20% of patients had ever used a spacer. For nurses to take the time to teach individual patients spacer technique is repetitive and time-consuming. It can be replaced by an educational video. Other aspects of the bundle will target the ED staff with preset smart phrases as well as preformed templates to decrease cognitive workload. In theory, this bundle sounds wonderful, but this project involves evaluating whether or not this bundle is safe, effective, and acceptable. In terms of acceptability, do ED staff and patients actually use it? Is it effective in reaching its goal of decreasing input while increasing throughput and output? And is it safe? Does it decrease adverse events as well as representations to the emergency department? Using this information, we can tailor the bundle both to thunderstorm asthma as well as for future disasters as well. Just like an AED, this bundle offers the potential to reach shock, fibrillating, emergency department in stagnant blood, and reset the heart with a sinus rhythm. Thank you very much for your attention.
A very strong start, Catherine. Just give the judges a few moments to catch up on their feedback and their scores. And a reminder for those joining us online, if you'd like to scroll down the bottom of the website, feel free to leave some feedback for Catherine and all our lovely presenters. And if you complete the last question that's there to summarize the presentation, you'll go in the running to an audience prize as well. All right, I'd like to call upon our second presenter for today, Tony Huang, who's joining us from the Melbourne Medical School. So whenever you're ready, Tony, please take it away.
Imagine waking up after surgery. As you move up, you feel a racking pain in your body. And you think to yourself, this seriously sucks. But hey, it's all over, right? I don't have to do this again. Unfortunately, for patients, this is not the case for patients who are suffering from joint infection after surgery. Around 30,000 Australians suffer from joint infection after surgery each year. And what happens is these patients do not have the luxury of actually taking a break after surgery, because sometimes they will need to undergo multiple revision surgeries to correct the infection. My project is focused on the development of a model that helps us investigate the infections and hopefully find a way to minimize the risk of infections in these patients. So the way our model works is that we have several layers of artificially generated tissues that are stacked together. And what we can do is seed bacteria within these layers and allow for them to proliferate. Once the bacteria does proliferate, it causes an artificial infection within the joint. And we can take these layers apart in order to analyze them and find which layer of the bacteria has progressed to. In doing so, we are able to significantly understand how the infection progression works. And one of the things that we've actually done with the model is that we've taken these bacteria layers and we added vancomycin, an antibiotic that's commonly used to treat post-surgical infections in these tissues. We found that the clinically recommended doses of vancomycin are actually insufficient at killing off most of the bacteria involved in joint infection in our model. And so this would advise that perhaps current clinical guidelines are insufficient. We also found that in our model, we found several biomarkers that are indicative of infection previously unknown. So by characterizing these, we may be able to provide earlier diagnoses of infection in order to minimize the risk of repetitive surgery. With that, I'd like to conclude by saying that our model is optimized for understanding this post-surgical infections, and with it, we hope to unravel the mysteries of joint infection layer by layer.
just to the presenters, if there are mic issues or things like that, I'll give you a few more seconds. So if you see me fiddling with the iPad, don't worry about it.
Judges a few more seconds to finalize their scores. Alrighty, so I'd like to call next presenting Yushi Zhu, who's joining us from the Department of Surgery at St. Vincent's Hospital. Whenever you're ready, Yushi.
So humans have this innate curiosity about foreseeing the future, and perhaps that's why fortune tellers have been so intrigued by the stars on the planets for millennia. But in the 21st century, surgery is catching up with astrology. And right here at the University of Melbourne, as part of our PhD, we've developed our very own model to predict the future. And let me explain. So this slide behind me shows a very typical Australian knee arthritis. In fact, 1 in 10 Australians suffer from knee arthritis, resulting in pain, stiffness, and mental health detriment. For some of these patients, considering a knee replacement will be a massive decision that's looming right at the forefront of their minds. But no surgery comes without risk. And studies have shown up to 20% of patients who end up with knee replacement are left feeling dissatisfied months or even years down the track. And so for a patient like this one who is considering a knee replacement, it begs the question, if we could tell them ahead of time what their likely outcome would be from having a knee replacement surgery, would that influence their decision to go under the knife? And that's kind of where my PhD comes in. We've built our own predictive model, the Smart Choice tool, to predict for patients their likely outcome after knee replacement. And to build this model and build this tool, we've used lessons of the past to guide the future. And what I mean by that is that the tool has been built on the medical records of over 7,000 patients who've had their knee replacement at St. Vincent's in the last 20 years. And then using these medical records, we're able to see which patients have done well after their surgery and which patients haven't done so well, and compare these two groups to find out exactly what it is about these patients that make them more or less likely to succeed. And then with some fancy maths and a couple of computer programs, we've come up with our own equation as part of the tool, where a patient can enter their age, their gender, and their baseline symptoms, and the tool can tell them their probability for a successful knee replacement. And this power to predict the future comes with immense and exciting possibilities for patients, for surgeons, and even beyond. For the patient, this is all about informed decision making. Knowledge is power, and the Smart Choice tool can give patients both the knowledge and the power to make the best decision for their own healthcare. For the surgeon, it's about highlighting which patients are likely to succeed and which patients may need a little bit more support and a little bit more care to optimize their surgical outcome. And this affords the surgeon an opportunity to provide tailored, individualized care for these patients who otherwise may not have thrived with just a standard care alone. So there we have it, my PhD, building the Smart Choice tool, in essence, a mathematical fortune teller to predict the future for patients who are considering knee replacement.
An excellent presentation to the future, I think. Nice. Just a reminder to all of our presenters as well, just to project your voice so we can pick it up on the iPad for all of those joining us online as well. So up next, we'll be hearing from Aidan Jackson from the Department of Surgery and Ophthalmology.
I want you all to look around this fantastic room for a moment. Appreciate the ability you have to see the brilliant world around us. Now imagine that world disappearing, starting from the outside, moving towards the middle until you can see just a cone of light, or for some patients, nothing at all. For almost 500,000 Australians and over 80 million people worldwide with glaucoma, this terrifying prospect is a reality. People can go from perfect vision to complete blindness in glaucoma in as little as a dozen years, have higher rates of depression and anxiety, and worse quality of life. Patients with glaucoma are monitored with visual field tests like this one. This is a normal result, which is a relief because these are my visual fields. The small black dot you see is representative of my blind spot, which we all have. But for a patient with glaucoma, that blackness spreads insidiously across their visual field. Glaucoma is managed by lowering eye pressure, but even with the best care, almost everyone continues to lose vision. The two most powerful predictors for quality of life in glaucoma are the speed of vision loss and the presence of any central vision loss. Hearing about these two groups, I was spurred to investigate fast progressors and central progressors in our own context in Melbourne. We therefore undertook a retrospective study analysing 295 eyes from 190 patients with glaucoma. We investigated the MD24, which is a standard numerical representation of a visual field test of the whole of vision, as well as our own calculated value, the MTD10, which looks at central vision only. Initial results were unsurprising. We found a rate of fast progressors on MD24 of around 6%, which is fairly consistent with worldwide studies which lie between 5 and 10%. But our central analysis was the most shocking. We found that over 9% of people on the MTD10 analysis were progressing at fast rates in the centre of their vision. Just how were we missing these people losing critical vision? Almost 1 in 10 people. The answer came when we analysed people who were progressing at fast rates on either MD24 or MTD10, finding that over a third of them were picked up on MTD10 alone. That meant that over a third of people had ostensibly normal visual field results, but were losing critical vision in the centre at fast rates. Our study demonstrates clearly that a significant proportion of patients with glaucoma, even under the best care, continue to lose vision, and especially in the centre. Quite clearly, measures of central vision, such as our MTD10, should be included as standard on all visual field results, so that those with the most to lose from their disease are not left unnecessarily blind. Thank you.
Up next, we've got Zoe Zhang, who's joining us from the Baker Institute. So, Zoe, whenever you're ready.
Did you know that one Australian is diagnosed with diabetes every 5 minutes, and over 1.8 million Australians are living with diabetes, and sadly, 5,000 of them will die eventually. So what is diabetes? It's a lifelong illness in which a hormone named insulin cannot be used or produced properly. So our body uses insulin to regulate the blood sugar level. Without it, sugar will accumulate in our bloodstream and cause severe consequences on our health system. So patients could develop limb amputation, heart attacks, and ultimately an early grave. And in fact, heart attacks are still the leading cause of death among diabetics. 2 out of 3 patients die because of heart attacks. And the culprit behind these alarming numbers is actually our white blood cells. You are aware that white blood cells could protect us from infections. Too much of white blood cells could also be a problem. So numerous studies have shown that high blood sugar levels could encourage the formation of white blood cells, and patients will end up having more white blood cells than they needed. And these extra white blood cells can enter our vessel, heart, inflame the vessels, and help the plaque build up. As you can see on the slide, the plaque will narrow the vessels and ultimately leading to the heart attacks. So I am investigating a small molecular drug named O304 to tackle this white blood cells expansion. How? By activating an enzyme named AMP activating protein kinase, or AMPK. So what exactly is AMPK? It's the enzyme that maintains the balance of our body's energy supply and reuse. And scientists just recently found one of its downstream activity is actually to regulate the formation of white blood cells from our bone marrow. And unsurprisingly, this downstream activity is also diminished in diabetes. So this suggests that by promoting the AMPK activity through O304, we maybe could reverse the white blood cells expansion in diabetes. And we are testing this hypothesis through a mouse model. So we will give O304 to our diabetic mice, lacking this enzyme, and also the normal diet to our healthy control mice, and monitor the white blood cell level. And we expect by treating diabetic mice with O304, their white blood cell level will be lower and eventually equal to their in healthy control mice. And ideally, on my hope, is to save millions of existing diabetic patients, who may include the members of your family, your loved ones, from ever suffering heart disease again. Thank you.
It's done.
For joining us in person off, the QR code links to a survey. If you'd like to give any of that presenters feedback for today as well. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker for today, Keegan Chen, who's joining us from the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So whenever you're ready.
Stillbirth is one of the most devastating outcomes of fetal growth restriction, where fetal growth restriction is where a baby has a restricted growth potential. What we think is the leading cause of this is placental insufficiency. This means a baby has limited access to oxygen and essential nutrients. In our lab, we are investigating placental insufficiency. This can trickle into predispositions later on in life, such as cerebral palsy, ADHD, and health implications all around the body. It is very important that we investigate fetal growth restriction, because not only is there currently no treatment at all, but the incidence is 6 times higher in areas of a low socioeconomic status. In our group, we compare growth-restricted placentas with normal ones, and we have found a particular molecule called RIP-GRIP during our preliminary gene screening. RIP-GRIP was dysregulated in our growth-restricted placentas. We found that at the cellular level, RIP-GRIP was different, and this was from looking at the differences between growth-restricted placentas and normal ones. There is promise for RIP-GRIP because it is part of a larger cellular process called autophagy, where dead cells are cleared away, and this allows new cells to grow. We investigate these, and by investigating these, we have a better understanding of how placental function occurs and how growth-restricted placenta damage happens. And in doing so, we can get a grip. By investigating a gene with a brand new pathway, it allows us to guide therapeutics and how the placental function occurs. And this can lead us onto therapeutics by repurposing drugs or making new ones.
Thanks, Keegan. So I think this is our last presentation for the first break for today. I'd like to introduce Sining Lee from the Doherty Institute. So whenever you're ready, take it away.
So considering we do have a coffee break shortly after my presentation, it's a perfect time for me to explain my topic of interest, the gut. So you may know that what you eat can affect your weight and energy levels greatly. However, you might not know that diets can greatly affect your immune system. Approximately 70 to 80% of your immune system is located in your gut. And now there's growing evidence to show that nutrients and byproducts of your gut bacteria, collectively known as metabolites, can directly modulate your immune cells. One of these immune cells is known as the dendritic cells, and they are my specialty. So your immune system can be divided into two parts. Your innate immunity, which is more general and short term. It protects us from illnesses before the big guns. Your adaptive immunity kicks in. This is more specialized and more long term. The dendritic cells act as communication links between your innate and adaptive immunity, and therefore can shape your immune responses to diseases. So, knowing that metabolites can affect the way that dendritic cells link these two major parts of our immune system together, we can take great advantage of this. So in my project, I'm building a model in which we can test metabolites against dendritic cells, and therefore we can change the way that these two parts of our immune systems interact. So knowledge gained from my project, we can use this to, we can use knowledge from my project to boost our immunity and potentially we can use knowledge gained from my project to boost our immunity and enhance the performance of our drugs to different people. And therefore, the modern pharmaceutical industry often neglects the importance of increasing the performance of drugs existing on the market and increasing the accessibility of them to patients. Therefore, we are in dire need of a solution that both increases the effectiveness of drugs already on the market and the accessibility of them and the economical cost, so that patients and the public health sector is not burdened by unaffordable medical costs. Therefore, my project produces a potential solution to this. So we're looking into a future where instead of getting multiple boosters for a vaccine, we may be given.
Just tap it. Just tap it.
So we're looking into a future where instead of getting multiple boosters for a vaccine, we may be given complementary supplements. Instead of getting therapy, we may be given customized diets. So with my project, I hope to bring these drugs and these more accessible solutions to patients who really need them around the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. I think that was the perfect segue for our first coffee break for the day. So for those of us joining us online, we'll be reconvening at 11 o'clock. And for those of us here today, there's a fantastic spread right behind you next to the wall. And hope to see everyone soon. Perfect. Well, hope everyone enjoyed their coffee break and got a nice feed. Before we get going with the next lot of presenters, just a quick announcement. Unfortunately, Rita, our next presenter, is unable to make it today. She's been struck down with COVID, so all our thoughts are with her and her family, and hopefully for a quick recovery. And so with that, we may just move on to the presenter after. So Anna Trendgren from Biomedical Engineering. You ready, Anna? Please take it away.
We know the human body has a great capacity for healing. When we get a little cut on our skin, it doesn't take long for the skin to repair itself, and soon we have nothing but a small scar to remind us. Unfortunately, it's not the same case with the cartilage that lines our joints, like in the knee. For example, if we injure our knee playing sport or in a work accident, and if the cartilage is damaged, it cannot repair itself. And this is a real problem because cartilage is essential to our daily lives. It cushions our joints as we walk and run, and it allows our joints to move freely without friction. So when damaged, the defects and lesions you see in this arthroscopic image on the right disrupt the way the joint moves. This can cause pain, lead to early onset osteoarthritis, and even the need for a total joint replacement. Overall, this is a really painful and expensive problem for individuals and the broader economy. In Australia in 2015, healthcare costs of osteoarthritis were $5.5 billion. So what we want to do is replace the tissue that's lost, and we can do this using tissue engineering. So by supplying all the right ingredients to this defect in the cartilage, we can essentially aim to grow new cartilage to fill this hole. We can take the patient's own stem cells and we can deliver them to the knee in a gel that's simply set by UV light. But of course, it's not that simple. What my PhD aims to do is address one of the big problems in all these approaches to repair articular cartilage, and that's integrating an implant or repair tissue with the surrounding cartilage. So cartilage is very dense, it's slippery, and by its nature, it's anti-adhesive. In fact, it's 10 times smoother than ice. So you can imagine it's really difficult to stick something to this wet and slippery surface. And this is a real problem because even if these tissue engineering techniques can grow new cartilage, which they can, if there's any gap or point of weakness between the new cartilage and the patient's surrounding tissue, this can eventually degrade over time under load. So to overcome this, we use an enzyme that can help form chemical bonds between the gel containing cells and the patient's own cartilage. We've already seen that this enzyme makes our gel twice as sticky, and it doesn't impact the cell's ability to build new cartilage tissue. And we're now investigating how well this tissue links up with the surrounding cartilage. Our goal is to seamlessly repair this articular cartilage surface and get back to that image on the left and prevent the progression of osteoarthritis in the long term. Thank you.
We'll just judge a few minutes before we slide over to the next presentation. For anyone who's joined us online, if you'd like to scroll down to the bottom of the page, you're welcome to give feedback to all of our presenters as well. And answering the last question to summarize the presentation puts you in the draw from audience prize. So don't forget to fill that one out. All right, I think I'll hand over to Lyndon, who's joining us from Latrobe Uni in the Department of Allied Health, Human Services and Sport. Whenever you're ready.
Did you know that people with osteoarthritis are twice as likely to get heart disease? How can arthritis in a hip or a knee have anything to do with the heart? Well, it all has to do with physical activity. People with arthritis move 30% less than everyone else, leaving them at risk of developing low-grade inflammation linked to health conditions like heart disease. A joint replacement should fix this, right? After all, joint replacements effectively reduce pain and improve function, so people will naturally move more. Wrong. People who have a joint replacement are also more likely to develop heart disease. Why? because 95% of people who've had a joint replacement still do not meet physical activity recommendations. For some reason, people do not use their new joint to move more for their health, like brisk walking. Finding out why this happens is what my PhD is about. I initially found that after joint replacement, people increased their physical activity while they were doing rehab with a physio watching, but this plateaued after they finished. This results leads to the idea that the amount of activity a person does after joint replacement has more to do with that person's behaviour and patterns of behaviour, for example, habits a person has formed, than the structure and function of their joint. I then asked people who'd had a knee replacement what they knew about physical activity and what motivated them to be active. It was obvious people did not know how much and what type of activity they should be doing for their health. I do sewing, art, craft. I'm busy, said one participant. Also, people prioritise activities that were important to them. Using my new knee to spend time with people is more important than being physically active, said another. Now, one of the fundamental things about helping people change their behaviour is to first give them knowledge. How can someone make the decision to do something different if they don't know how it will benefit them? People who have had a joint replacement need to know that being active will benefit their health. To help people who have had a knee replacement better understand the benefits of being more active, I co-designed an infographic with consumers who had a knee replacement. It's up there on the slide. I am currently studying if this infographic improves people's knowledge of physical activity. This may be the first step in fundamentally changing the way we help improve the health of people with osteoarthritis.
Moving on to our last few presenters left for today. Judges a few more minutes and finalise their scores. I'd like to introduce DJ Kroger from the Royal Melbourne Hospital Department of Surgery. So whenever you're ready, DJ, take it away.
1 in 6 men in this room will likely be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. That may be you, or that may very well be a loved one. Prostate cancer is the second most diagnosed cancer in men and the 4th leading cause of death in Australian males. My name is DJ Kroger, and today I'd like to present to you when prostate cancer treatments fail and what we can potentially do to fix this. For the purpose of this talk, I'll be using the term men and male to refer to those biologically born with the prostate. However, I do acknowledge that this is not always the case. So I'd like you to all think about learning guitar. At the start, the strings may start to cut the fingers. You don't want to play for very long, but you persist, you really want to learn. And eventually, your fingers harden. You can play that guitar for much longer and jam on all the time. This is what happens in cancer cells in the prostate. We treat them with a therapy that essentially prevents them from getting what they need to grow. This is called androgen. But after a while, they become resistant. Treatment no longer works, and the cancer can grow again, often much more aggressively. Our lab aims to look at these cells and try and figure out if there's a bridge that we can get to prevent these poor outcomes. And we think we may have found that with previous works in something called snail. This is not a backyard creature you find, but instead is a protein that acts as a guard inside the cell. It tells the cell what to do, for example, to migrate away, or importantly, to be drug resistant. So we believe that by blocking this guard, we may be able to allow for the treatments to work, for the cancer to stop receiving what it needs to survive, the androgen, and completely be ruled out altogether. Because in most males who receive non-surgical treatment, cancer treatments will fail. So, sorry, this is the aim of our project. Wow.
tuned for next time. We learn the aim. You're still on the clock, DJ, so.
Yeah.
DJ, you remember your octave? Or just the game?
Yes.
Yeah.
You were ahead of time by 5 minutes.
Do you just start again? I think I've had a major interruption, so if you want to
Up to you.
It's up to you. I don't mind. I'm not sure.
So you can take it from the aim and then go from there, and I'll give you a bit more time to worry about that.
I can give a brief recap.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry about that. A brief recap. So in the prostate is extremely dependent on a hormone called androgen, and therefore the cancerous cells in the prostate are also dependent on that hormone to grow. What allows for the treatment to fail, however, and our treatment being depriving it, is what we believe a molecule called snail. So we aim to try and block snail and see if that leads to better outcomes in patients. We want to do this because in most cases, treatments fail. And therefore, if we can find what is allowing these treatments to fail, we can either produce therapies that can allow our current treatments to work better, or alternative pathways to target in the long run. Because 1 in 6 is far too many, and we do not want to see that number continue to increase. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Apologies for the interruption there. I think we're ahead of Grip and now Snail, so come and hear what we've got coming up next. All right. So our second last presenter for today is Stephanie Doyle from the School of Engineering at RMIT. Whenever you're ready, Steph.
Take a look at the screen behind me. We have a neat log-pile stack and human trabecular bone. What do these two things have in common? I'll give you a minute to ponder. Musculoskeletal tissue, including bone and cartilage, is the most transplanted tissue worldwide due to a wide range of trauma. But tissue engineering is a promising tool to be able to regenerate this lost tissue. It combines together a biological-based approach where cells are capable of making new tissue, along with soft and hard materials, which can mechanically reinforce the entire construct. To make these mechanical elements, we can use 3D printing. It's the perfect tool. But with traditional 3D printing, we extrude material through a nozzle in order to make an entire structure in a layer-by-layer fashion. But this tool is currently underutilized. This is where we come back to our log file stack. The majority of 3D printed tissue engineered constructs in the literature follow this log file design. Is it because we see this design in our human body? No. Is it because it has superior mechanical properties? No, it doesn't. It's because it's the easiest way to print a 3D porous structure. But we need to turn to the body for the inspiration in terms of design. Everything in the body has a specific design and function. Take the human bone. It has this cellular lattice-based structure, and it's said to be somewhat of an engineering marvel because under certain stress environments, it has the strength of cast iron or being as light as wood. So we absolutely need to take the body as our inspiration. But currently, it's the technical ability to 3D print these structures that is holding us back. So in my PhD, I developed a negative embodied sacrificial template 3D printing technique or nested printing. And it takes the best features of both casting and 3D printing. It needs you to flip your thinking. Instead of 3D printing material directly, we print the inverse, being a sacrificial mold or template. And we do so in a water dissolvable material. Then all we need to do is essentially fill in that mold, pour in a material, just like you pour batter into a cake pan. We then allow this material to solidify and place the entire form in water to allow our sacrificial template to completely dissolve. This leaves our original design in our material of choice. And you can see behind me that by printing in inverse, we can easily create these porous, non-uniform structures that completely mimic tissues within the body. And bone is just one example of this. We can apply the same concept to any tissue in the body. So with nested printing, we can say goodbye to the simplistic log pile structure and step into the next generation of 3D printing for tissue engineered medical implants. Thank you.
So I've got our final presenter for today. I think after all the sitting down, we've done a perfect way to end this off. So I'd like to introduce Chiwei Wang from Department of Surgery here at the University of Melbourne. Whenever you're ready, Chiwei.
So I'd like to start off with a question, which is how many of us are struggling with physical activity engagement these days? I know I do. And it seems like I'm definitely not the only one. So for anyone who's wondering, COLD stands for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Groups, and essentially stands for anyone who's born overseas or come from, or descendants of those who come from overseas, that differing language or culture to the mainstream Australian population. Why have I singled us out? Well, it turns out, despite reporting high rates of things like high blood glucose and high blood pressure, individuals from COLD communities report significantly lower levels of physical activity compared to their Australian counterparts. So my research was trying to understand why was this the case. And upon looking at existing literature published to date, it turns out all of these factors are kind of related to a concept called acculturation. Big word, but essentially just means how much has the person integrated into the host culture and how much have they retained from their cultural origin. So I guess central to this is an individual's cultural and religious background, which influences their understanding and relationship with physical activity. So individuals define physical activity ranging from things like meditation all the way to intense professional sport. Gender roles similarly defined and established through culture also limited women the type, the amount, and the setting of physical activity which is considered appropriate for women. So for example, female Arab migrants often required gender-exclusive settings for the sake of public modesty. Similarly, quote unquote, the rigid Australian lifestyle, which is kind of different to how we brand ourselves normally, where deliberate attempts are required to remain physically active, was also seen as challenging for many COLD individuals who are more used to spontaneous, incidental physical activity. Now, assuming that appropriate services did exist, which was often not the case, an individual's utilization of such services was further limited by things like availability, financial constraints, environmental concerns relating to things like safety, as well as availability of transport, given that many individuals from COLD communities actually reside in areas with low socioeconomic status and high crime rates, as well as things like language barriers. Key enablers were also identified, with social supports being quoted as a key one. So I guess the main findings from my research was that COLD communities were a non-homogeneous group, and they face both COLD-specific as well as general factors impacting their participation with physical activity, and that individuals from COLD communities should be empowered to participate in the design and implementation of initiatives to encourage greater physical activity. Thank you.
I think that was the final presentation that we had for this morning. Well done to all of our presenters today, and thank you again for coming up here and putting yourself on the spot and doing some fine presentations. A reminder again for all of us, for all those in the room and hearing the presentations in person, please remember to press the submit button at the end of the form to make sure the feedback gets submitted. And similarly for those online, if you scroll down the bottom, just remember to press submit as well. We also ask those joining us online if they would like to submit feedback for the event as well. They're welcome to do that on the website. Next up, we've got another short little coffee break for our judges to deliberate and I think pick the winners for today. It's going to be a very tough decision for them considering the caliber of presentation that we've had. So I'll just give another break and we'll join back here at around 10 to.
Yeah. we might shorten this break, given that.
Yep.
What time would you like?
11:45.
Okay, we'll catch everyone back again at 11:45 to hear our price sessions. Thank you.
Yeah. Passion for change. Maybe the new lost time.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's been a wonderful morning to hear from all of our presenters, and I think the judges have had some fierce remarks from everyone in terms of your presentation. So well done to everyone for joining us today. I'd like to hand over to Professor Peter Chung, the head of the Department of Surgery, to close off the morning and then hopefully announce the winners of our competition.
Thank you very much, Sid. And can I just start by congratulating the organisers, Sid, and the rest of the team for organising today. The thing that really was remarkable about this, and the Dean said it, was that it had nothing to do with anyone from the university hierarchy. This is exactly what we want to see, where environments are created and then we just get the hell out of your way. You know, and whether you're a student, it's an undergraduate, postgraduate, graduate studies, doing high degrees, the role of people like me is actually just to get out of your way. And when we do that, we see products like this. And today I would have given absolutely everyone first prize. I'm not saying that to make you feel good. Well, actually I am. No, I'm actually saying that because what was most impressive is the talks that were given ranked with, this could have been an international podium. And I've been to international meetings where we would call this rapid fire. 3 minutes, bang, 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 bang. And as I was saying to people earlier, the people like me who've been around for too long always push back against 3 minutes because that's just not how you do it. Because you don't get a full 35, 40 minutes of listening to my voice. You know, so we'll just leave it to the junior people to do. And they always did a better job. They got to the point, they stuck to the rules, they got the message out, and everyone understood what was going on. And that's how I felt today, you know. And the fact that it was open to all comers from different institutions doing different things was a real eye-opener, and I congratulate all your supervisors for the work that they've done in creating an environment where you can explore, you can play for the time that you have. I congratulate each and every one of you for the magnificent performance today, which I found honestly eye-opening. And whilst there were a few projects that I have some familiarity with, I was still blown away by the simplicity of the message, the clarity of the messages that came through, and the professionalism in which all of you presented. So I do agree with Sid. It was, I'm sure, a very tough job for the panel members to debate the odd blood nose. And if you look very carefully at Professor Hinkle's face, you'll see a little cut just above the left eyebrow. He would say it's because he fell down the staircase. I heard some blows. So it's my pleasure to present this. But before I do hope that the organisers consider again running this next year. We had between 25 and 30 people here, 50 people online, and that's 85 people at this session. Really, really was very, very good. So without further ado, could I please invite up the runner-up for this student showcase, Ada Jackson. Ada. That's the ticket that takes him to a place where he has to be de-COVIDized and all the rest of it. Congratulations. The first prize for outstanding performance at this showcase goes to Yushi. Wow. And with that, I'll hand back to Sid. Thank you very much, Sid. Well done.
Thanks, Prof. And thank you again to all of our presenters for today, and especially our judges, Professor Hinkle, Margaret, Bob, and Marion as well. Thanks again for all your time giving up here today to judge all the presenters. I'm sure they'll find your feedback very helpful in whatever they go on to present it next. And I would also like to announce the winner of our feedback competition. Congratulations to Katie Lee-Chen. Lee-Chenny, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is that you, Kate? Oh, congratulations, sorry, I thought you were online. But we'll be in touch and we'll get you with your prize soon, okay? And thank you again, everyone, for joining us here today. And with that, I think I'll let you get on with your lunch and get on with the rest of your day.
Some photos.
Nah, Kate got the picture.
I got a solid one. Photo.